Good morning and a warm welcome to everyone. My name is Rio, and on behalf of Wavelink, I would like to thank you for organizing time out of your day to attend our FortiDeploy Info-Byte, where we learn more about Fortinet's zero-touch bulk provision solution. Today, we are joined by Wavelink's Kieran O'Brien and a very special guest from Fortinet, Andrew Vinton. Please feel free to grab a drink and some snacks to accompany you for the rest of the session. To celebrate the launch of our new Wavelink Fortinet portal, Wavelink Fabric Ready, we will be providing reward points to highly engaged attendees that will be contacted shortly after the session. We are also giving everyone here 20 points for attending a substantial amount of the session. These points can be spent in our rewards shop or can be cashed out. I will now pass it over to Kieran to commence with today's session.
Thanks, Rio. Welcome, everyone. As Rio said, we'll be going through FortiDeploy for today's Info-Byte, which is Fortinet's zero-touch bulk provisioning solution. Joining us is Andrew Vinton, as you can see in the webcam. Thanks, Andrew, for coming along and agreeing to work with us on presenting this across to our partners. And if you guys have any questions throughout the session, there is a questions section within our presentation. So feel free to put your questions in there at any time. Either myself or Andrew will go through and try and answer those questions for you. And we also have a Q&A section right at the end of today's session. So if we can and we think they're really great questions, we'll also bring them up in that sort of live chat Q&A section. So agenda for today, we'll go through a little bit of an introduction to Wavelink, just in case any partners that are on the meeting or on the webinar today haven't touched with Wavelink previously. We'll go through what exactly FortiDeploy is, if you haven't heard of it before, and some of the key benefits for you and your customers. We'll quickly touch on sort of high level how the bulk provisioning works from a device perspective. Andrew's going to go through and actually give us a really great demo of how to deploy the device using this bulk provisioning service. We'll touch on exactly what hardware supports this and how to order it, and where to find a little bit more information, both sales documents so you can communicate out to your partners, to your customers, exactly what this service is, and also some technical documents so that your technicians can actually utilize and deploy this service. So for those that haven't had much interaction with Wavelink before, we were established back in 1998 with sort of key focus of helping our partners and helping our vendors reach out to the partners. And the way we were doing this is by building capability and depth of knowledge by focusing on key strategic vendors and working really closely with our partners just to make sure that we've got that real alignment and everyone knows exactly what they can do and what the solution can do. And Wavelink was introduced back to Fortinet in 2016 because we were actually distributing a product from Maru Networks, which was a wireless vendor, and Fortinet had purchased out Maru to help bolster up their wireless solutions. That was the introduction, and since then we've been working really hard with Fortinet on the cybersecurity land, and we've got this really great sort of friendship between Wavelink and Fortinet. We almost feel like long lost family at this point. We are an 100% Australian owned company. We have a sort of culture that makes it easy to do business with us because we have a bit of a yes we can do attitude, and we try and put our partners at the forefront of everything that we do. And we have many other benefits to working to us other than our culture, and we've got professional services programs that include staging and rollout of devices and installation services. And as Rio touched on before, we have a brand new partner portal where you can go in and view our current incentive programs, view what enablement we have running and what's coming up, and enroll in some of the training programs that we have. So if you're not familiar with the new partner portal, don't worry. We'll be shooting out some marketing material for it soon to all of our partners to get them across it, because it's a really great asset for you guys, and it's designed specifically for our partners in mind. So with that, let's jump in and have a look at what is FortiDeploy and its key benefits. So FortiDeploy is a product built into FortiGate Cloud and FortiLAN Cloud that uses that for zero-touch provisioning of devices, whether they're deployed locally or remotely. And the FortiDeploy provides automatic connection of the FortiGates or FortiAPs to be managed by either FortiGate Cloud, FortiLAN Cloud, or you can even point them directly to a FortiManager. And at the time of purchase, you can order a FortiDeploy SKU in addition to FortiGate Cloud subscriptions, and this gives you a one registration key for all of the supported devices on your purchase order, and that's where the real power of FortiDeploy comes in. So what that means is if you've got, let's say, 4 FortiGate devices or maybe 100 FortiGate devices, instead of having to go through and add each of those devices individually in order to do things like zero-touch provisioning or just enroll them, FortiDeploy puts all of those devices into a single key. So when you go into the portal, all you do is you enroll with that bulk key, and then it will register all of those serials for you, and then you can go through and do things like zero-touch provisioning that Andrew is going to show us how to do. And this supports, not just FortiGate devices, but also FortiAP devices to help simplify that bulk provisioning. And that's sort of an issue that we're seeing with a lot of our partners is as they're scaling out and they're doing more and more deployments and larger deployments for each of their customers is, how do we speed up that registration process? And this is part of that. So at a high level, so how does this FortiDeploy solution work for zero-touch provisioning? And there's this really great slide that I found in the docs, in the Fortinet docs, that sort of highlights it fairly well. And you can see here sort of what happens is when the customer visits the FortiCloud.com portal, either they can go in and register the individual FortiCloud keys for each of their devices, which you can imagine for a deployment of like 100 devices is quite slow. But if you've got that FortiDeploy bulk provisioning license and you've got the registration key that comes with it, all you need to do is enter that registration key, and then all of the devices, the full list of devices, will be listed in there for you to register automatically. As devices are then at these remote locations plugged in for deployment, they then obtain an IP address via DHCP from your ISP or some other solution that's built in. And then these devices initially will call home to FortiCloud, and that's where the zero-touch deployment comes in. So from there, the device will then receive a customer's pre-configured management choice for their devices. That's whether it would want to be managed by a FortiManager, or whether it would be managed by some of Fortinet's cloud services like FortiGate Cloud or FortiLAN Cloud. And once this process is complete, then the device can be monitored and managed from these management interfaces, whichever one is chosen for the specific device. And it's that simple. So if you've got 100 devices and you do your bulk provisioning key, put it in, it'll list the 100 devices, then you can just select those 100 devices and say, I want to point it to a specific FortiManager, and then off you go, bam, you're up and running. And we'll see in a second here, Andrew is actually going to demonstrate sort of what that would look like from a single device deployment, so you can see just how easy that really is. So Andrew, I'll hand it across over to you so you can show just the power of what it is we're talking about.
Yeah, awesome. So first of all, thank you for having me on, and it's a pleasure to be here to share some of the 40 insights on these webinars that you guys do. And I'd just like to say, nice jumper, by the way. I do like that one, and that's some really good joint merch collaboration that I'm seeing.
It's got a really nice.
I get one of those myself at some stage. So very good job on the merch, but we're here to talk about FortiDeploy. So as you've just heard, FortiDeploy is a really easy way of deploying devices, especially in a zero-touch scenario. And I've been in plenty of scenarios myself where I've had to go and send a FortiGate out to a remote site. And the problem is that you don't have smart hands on the other end. And the question always comes up of how can we actually go and deploy this device by basically just plugging in a power cable and giving it a WAN connection. So for instance, we have a number of 3G, 4G models. FortiDeploy works with those as well. So I've actually used it in the past for the models of FortiGates that have SIM cards in them. All you need to do, put a SIM card in, make sure it's activated, plug the power cable in, and then run through the FortiDeploy process, which is what I'm going to show you guys now. So just bear with me a second while I share my screen. Awesome, there we go. So the obligatory question for every webinar, can you see my screen there, Kieran? Is that all coming through?
Absolutely. Yep.
Awesome, okay. That's a question that pretty much everyone asks every day nowadays. All right, so I'm logged into the Fortinet support portal here at the moment. This is just, so you log in with your support account, and what you'll need to do first off is go across to the FortiGate Cloud screen over here. So once you go into the FortiGate Cloud screen, and I've been logged out from inactivity, bear with me one sec.
It's always the way with live demos. There's always one little thing that hitches you up. It just happens to be the security function of auto logging you out.
It's the demo gods, right? So we have to make sure that we don't anger the demo gods as we go through these presentations. So anything that can go wrong will go wrong in these things. So if you've ever used FortiGate Cloud before, the idea is that this gives you a management interface for managing your FortiGates. If you have FortiGates that you need to get into remotely, this does actually give you a management tunnel into those gates as well. So the way FortiDeploy works is that when you go and power on a device down at a site which you can't access, you actually get an option in FortiDeploy to specify what you want to do with that device. So I'll show you what that looks like here. If you go over to the inventory screen, there'll be a couple of different tabs up the top. And if I go to FortiCare inventory, this will be devices that are registered but haven't been deployed yet. So they're not in FortiGate Cloud. They're not attached to FortiManager. This is where they'll show up. So I've got a couple of different VMs in here at the moment, just random ones in my demo environment. And what you need to do first is register the licensing for these devices. So once the licensing is registered, they'll show up in here. And as Kieran said before, the only thing you need to bear in mind is that when you actually purchase the FortiGate, you need to make sure that the order has that FortiDeploy SKU on it as well. So once you've registered it, the devices will show up in here, at which point all you need to do is just click on the checkboxes for whichever ones you want to deploy. And then you can pick a couple of different options up here. So you've got deploy to FortiManager, and then you've got deploy to FortiGate Cloud. So the deploy to FortiGate Cloud option is really easy. All you need to do, click on it, deploy, set your time zone. So I'm Adelaide based, so I'm going to select Adelaide here, if I can find it in the list. There we are, cool. And what that will do is that will go and add it to your FortiGate Cloud inventory here. Now, it will take a little while for this to go and deploy because it has to wait for the next polling connection from the gate. So I'd probably give it around 10-15 minutes, especially if you've just powered on the device. You can actually do this before you've powered on the device for the first time as well, so that when you power on the device the first time, it will automatically connect to FortiCloud and it will pull this information down and say, okay, cool. FortiCloud has told me that I need to FortiDeploy across to FortiGate Cloud. So once that happens, it'll go and establish a management tunnel and you'll be able to connect to it in here just like you can with any other FortiGate that's managed from FortiGate Cloud. Now, let's talk about the FortiManager option as well. So if you've got FortiManager, or if you need to have this externally accessible, that's the one caveat for this. So if you have your own FortiManager, whether it's a hosted FortiManager that you're running as an MSSP, or if you have a single FortiManager that manages multiple sites, all you need to do is select the device that you want to provision to FortiManager, and then head over to the FortiManager setup screen here as well. So what you do is you plug in your FortiManager IP or DNS name if you've got one, and then plug in the serial number for FortiManager. And if you do that, what will happen if I save the settings here, those will be the default settings for every time I click this button. So if you've got multiple sites, say you've got 10 sites you want to deploy, you've only got one in here at the moment, you can save those FortiManager settings. So next time you don't have to enter them, and all you have to do is click the tick box when you want to deploy one, go over here, deploy to FortiManager. Now, because I haven't set any settings in there, obviously it's asking me to set up something there. But the way that this works is very similar. So when a device starts for the first time, or when it does its next poll of FortiGate Cloud, it will pull these FortiDeploy settings, at which point it will get FortiManager config settings, which will be pulled to the device, and it will automatically go and contact that FortiManager. And on FortiManager, you can actually pre-authorize the device as well by adding a model device template. If you add the device into FortiManager, then you will have it come up straight away. Otherwise, you have a prompt on FortiManager with an unauthorized device that you can go and accept in your FortiManager console. All right, so that's the basics. That's really how it works. I'm just going to quickly check the chat to see if we've got any questions here, but feel free to put any questions about this in the chat as we're going through things as well. So is that all kind of making sense so far, Kieran?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, have you seen any questions come through that we need to answer?
I did have one from Mike, and he was asking, can I do a part order of devices on one key and another part on a second key, essentially doing separation of managers across business lines?
In terms of when you order the FortiDeploy key, as long as when you put the order in, because what happens is when the devices leave the factory, FortiDeploy is something that's turned on. So if there's a FortiDeploy key that's been ordered with the device, that will turn FortiDeploy on. Now, what you have to do is if you've got FortiDeploy enabled for a couple of different orders worth of gates, you still have to register those to multiple FortiCloud accounts. So when you do your registration, if you're looking for some kind of role-based access control on FortiDeploy, what I would suggest is, and this is especially relevant for MSSPs, is make sure that you're putting the devices into different FortiCloud accounts. So if you've got different customers that you're providing managed services for or managed firewall services, make sure that those devices are in their accounts, and then you've got your access permissions set up accordingly. But as far as FortiDeploy goes, it's basically the permissions for the FortiGate Cloud account that are used. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yep. And then we had one last one come through here, which is, do we need FortiCloud license for FortiDeploy itself?
No, you don't. So you can use the default FortiCloud license, the free FortiCloud license that comes with the gate. Obviously, if you're going to deploy it to a FortiCloud instance, there is the default limit of the FortiCloud license, the free FortiCloud license. But especially if you're doing it to FortiManager, if you buy the FortiDeploy SKU, you don't need any FortiCloud licensing whatsoever, because all it does is just enable this option in here, and then you can push it across to your FortiManager. But for FortiCloud, yes, you can use the free license, but there's just a couple of limitations on that as well, mostly around the number of devices that you can actually put into your free FortiCloud. Oh, here we go, just another one that came through from Mike. I have an on-prem FortiManager from FortiGate Cloud. Can I run/push my little script that sets up an IPsec VPN to corp provisioning VLAN so it can talk to a specific FortiManager to get the rest of its settings? I'm not quite sure what you mean with that one. So you have a FortiManager that's not accessible to the internet, and you need to push out other settings to the gate before you can get it there?
I believe that's what he means, yeah. So he's saying, can we initially manage it by FortiGate Cloud just to push those VPN settings to the FortiGate in order for the FortiGate to be able to access the FortiManager at that
You
remote
can.
location.
I don't think there's a way of running a script, especially on the free version, if you want to add extra settings to the device. It's fairly, FortiDeploy is fairly limited in what it does send down to the device originally. So with these FortiManager settings, it's designed to be as simple as possible. So it will only push the FortiManager settings. However, you can always go and use the remote management tunnel. So if you deploy it to FortiGate Cloud first, then once you've deployed it to FortiGate Cloud, you can use the management tunnel on the device to actually go and push your VPN settings from there as well.
So that management tunnel essentially allows you to tunnel directly to the FortiGate's graphical user interface from FortiGate Cloud, is that right?
Yeah, and unlike FortiManager, you actually get a management tunnel for the HTTPS interface as well as the CLI interface too. As most of you probably know, on FortiManager, you can only use the CLI. You can't direct tunnel to the HTTPS interface. So you'll get a management tunnel option, and on the management tunnel option, there will be HTTPS or SSH, and you can pick either one to log into the gate. Obviously, it will be a little slow because it's being proxied by FortiGate Cloud, so it won't be as slow as logging direct. It won't be as fast as logging directly into the box, but it does give you a good option for jumping in, especially if you need to point to a FortiManager that's not accessible, or you need to make some VLAN changes. You can point to FortiGate Cloud first, use the management tunnel, and then point it across to FortiManager from there. I actually like to use this option in particular, this remote management tunnel, as a bit of a fallback or a break glass when I'm doing site deployments as well, because a lot of the time, even if I'm pre-provisioning them with a config to send down to a site, it's always good to have a way to get into the gate if they can't connect back to FortiManager for some reason. So generally, I'll actually configure that so that I can jump in and fix anything if it goes down to a site that can't connect to FortiManager for some reason.
Yep. And that tunnel that's created from FortiGate Cloud to the FortiGate device is completely, separate to the FortiGate having HTTPS enabled on its WAN port. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. So the FortiCloud tunnel is very similar to the FortiManager tunnel. So that is its own proprietary encrypted connection, which will go back to FortiGate Cloud. It's actually, the tunnel itself it's part of the management connection that happens from the FortiGate to FortiGate Cloud. It's just when you enable the management tunnel option, it keeps essentially a session open that allows proxying of SSH and HTTPS traffic. But no, it's not enabling the interface on the WAN port, which means that you can actually use this to get to devices behind, say, CGNAT or behind other devices if they're on a network and don't have their own public IP address, because the management tunnel, much like the management tunnel for gates connecting to FortiManager, is initiated by the device. That means that it will actually just get natted out through CGNAT or whatever as per normal. So you can actually access that device even if it's behind another firewall or behind CGNAT. Question from Chanel. So we can split an order PO to get 2 keys for 2 different sets of devices across FortiCloud accounts. When you order devices, and Kieran, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but when you order a bunch of FortiGates, you then get the option, unless you're getting Wavelink to do it for you, of going and registering those against different FortiCloud accounts. When you order the FortiDeploy SKU, it's account agnostic. It just enables FortiDeploy on that box or on that set of boxes that you've ordered. When you go and register the licenses, it doesn't matter if you register all of them to different FortiCloud accounts or the same FortiCloud account. Either way, they're going to show up in your FortiCare inventory here on the account that the license is registered to. So if you've got a scenario where you need to register them and do FortiDeploys on different accounts, say different customers with different FortiManagers, you can buy them all in one hit. You can just buy the FortiDeploy SKU with all of those devices that you're ordering. As long as it's part of the order from the factory, you can go and register those devices to whoever you want down the track, and then FortiDeploy will be enabled for those devices and they'll show up on the screen here.
Yeah, and from my understanding then, the only limitation is the bulk key itself you won't be able to utilize, because the bulk key will try and register it to the one account. So in that instance, you're sort of losing the powerfulness of the bulk key, but you're still having the services of FortiDeploy. So it totally can be done by doing multiple customers' orders on one single PO. You just essentially limiting the fact that you can't utilize the bulk key.
Awesome, there we go. So I think that's pretty much it for the demo portion for the moment. So I'll keep answering questions as we roll in here.
I'll quickly go through the last couple of slides that we've got through while the questions are just rolling through, if you don't mind. So here we go. So what devices support FortiDeploy? So Andrew, from my understanding, it is FortiGate and FortiWi-Fi devices, all the way up to the 200E support the zero-touch provisioning. Just as they are, you don't need to touch them at all. You just plug them into your WAN port and off they go. But for other FortiGate models, 200E and above, because they don't come with DHCP enabled on any of their interfaces, from my understanding, the only thing you need to do is some sort of staging work to have DHCP enabled on one of the interfaces, and then you do your zero-touch provisioning. Is that right?
That's right, and we've kept that availability, especially that DHCP port, off our higher level models, especially on the, say, 200E, 200F up, because they're more moving away from the smaller SMB, the fanless design firewalls. So with the smaller firewalls, they're the ones that we see getting deployed down into small sites and that need this zero-touch provisioning. On the bigger devices, especially the rack mount ones, there is always a little bit of touch required to set those up, because, as you mentioned, there is no DHCP available on a port on the device by default. For all of the lower model devices, you can actually find, normally it's the WAN port or WAN 1. You can find in the product manual which device or which port has DHCP open by default. On the higher level models, you do have a couple of other options for provisioning. When the FortiGate boots for the first time, on the smaller models, if they've got DHCP turned on, you can actually pull a FortiManager IP address or DNS name from a DHCP option. So you should be able to find that in our docs for provisioning under the FortiManager admin guide. I think it's option 240 or 241. You can plug in an IP address or a DNS name in there. If you're provisioning higher model devices, especially the data center model firewalls, bear in mind that by default, you can actually use a USB stick to install both the firmware and a config onto the FortiGates as well. So if you've got larger FortiGates that you want to go and deploy, then you can always stick a staging config and the firmware you want to run on a USB, stick it in, and when it boots up for the first time, it will actually pull that config and that firmware and install it. So that's a really good way of getting staging config onto the higher level FortiGates as well.
And to support our partners, Wavelink has a staging services. So if you needed assistance with deployment of devices that are 200 and above that don't have DHCP enabled, we do have provisioning services to be able to help you out and unpack the device, put that initial configuration on where DHCP is enabled, rebox the device, and then send it directly to the location that it's going to be installed in.
And another question there about FortiSwitch as well. My FortiSwitch has a FortiCloud key. Is that for the cloud-based FortiSwitch manager, which is FortiLAN Cloud? Yes, it is. One quick aside for the FortiSwitch as well is that yes, there is FortiLAN Cloud, which we're not talking about in today's webinar, but there is kind of an equivalent of this for the FortiSwitches as well. If you're provisioning FortiSwitches, you've got the FortiLAN cloud option available. You also have, so by default on the FortiSwitches, there are ports which are set up as automatic FortiLink ports. So if you're trying to do zero-touch provisioning, especially in an SD branch style scenario, where you've got a FortiGate and a FortiSwitch that you want to deploy at the same time, the lower model FortiGates and even the higher model ones as well, I know definitely up to the 600E, have default FortiLink ports. On the F series and above, and on some of the E series, they're actually labeled as FortiLink ports as well. If you plug a switch into those by default, every switch will have a number of ports which are automatic FortiLink ports on first boot. Normally, they're the last ports in the last line card. So port 23 and 24 on our lower level 24 port switches, but all of those will be in the admin guide for the FortiSwitch itself. So that's a really easy way of getting a FortiSwitch connected and getting that into the gate so that you can manage it. And if you're deploying that across to FortiManager, then you will actually see that show up there as well, along with your gate too, if you've connected the right ports there.
Perfect. So for those wanting to purchase FortiDeploy, I put the SKU on the screen, and we'll share these slides with you as well so that you guys can reference back to it later. It is a one SKU per purchase order, so you don't need to purchase it 5 times for 5 FortiGates on a single purchase order. It is a single license for the whole purchase order. It's relatively cheap. It's $100 USD recommended MRSP. So it is quite cheap to do. So if you're deploying 100 FortiGate devices, that cost of the FortiDeploy is almost null and voided for you. It provides more value to you than not getting it. The only hidden gotcha is that it will only be orderable for stock that we need to purchase from Fortinet. So that means if you're looking to purchase some, let's say, smaller FortiGate devices, like 5 FortiGate 60Fs, we would need to put the purchase order directly with Fortinet in order to enable FortiDeploy. Whereas items that we can sell you from our stock holding aren't eligible for FortiDeploy. But if you have any questions about that or need any further clarification, at any point the sales operations team are fully aware of how this is ordered. So if you have any questions about, hey, I would like FortiDeploy on this purchase order, is it applicable, or would we need to have it delayed because we'd need to place the purchase order with Fortinet, just ask them and they'll be able to get back and let you know whether we would need to purchase this directly with Fortinet or what will happen.
We just had a couple of questions come through in the chat, and I just want to quickly go through. So when we're talking about bulk keys and when we're talking about FortiDeploy keys, so the bulk key basically creates one registration key. So leaving aside FortiDeploy, it's one registration key for all of the devices that you've bought on that PO. FortiDeploy is separate to that. So that FortiDeploy will enable the FortiDeploy option for every device on that PO. The bulk key, the limitation of that is that you get one key to register, and that'll register everything to that one account. With FortiDeploy, it doesn't care about what account you're registered to. So yeah, just bear that in mind when we're talking about the bulk key. That is separate to the FortiDeploy SKU here as well.
Perfect. And if anyone needs any further details around FortiDeploy, there's a lot of material out there. There's a solutions guide. There's also a solution brief, and the solution brief goes through and explains how to do the zero-touch provisioning and how to explain it directly to your customers. When we share the slides out, you can actually click either one of these 2 documents you can see on the screen, and it will actually take you to the relevant details. And then, for any technical team members that are out there, in docs.fortinet.com, there's 2 main locations. There's FortiGate Cloud that contains a whole section specifically set aside for FortiDeploy with a lot of details. And then also, it's slightly old at this point. It's only been updated to FortiOS 6.2.0, but there's a cookbook that explains it from a really high level, exactly what the FortiGate and FortiDeploy does and how they interact with each other. So that's a really great resource as well for anyone that wants to dive in and get a little bit more detail about exactly how FortiDeploy works.
And also, just because we had a couple of questions about FortiSwitch as well, I would recommend going and looking at the FortiLAN Cloud user guide, which you can find on our docs site. There is a section in there under managing FortiSwitches that goes through how to do deployment for FortiSwitches from FortiLAN Cloud as well.
Fantastic. And I've got one more question here, Andrew, which is probably one that you're really good to answer. Will FortiDeploy be replaced by FortiZTP in the near future?
So many of you will have seen the FortiZTP option available, and it's listed in brackets as beta in the Fortinet support portal. What I'll say on that one is watch this space for a future webinar talking about this. So this doesn't mean that FortiDeploy is going to disappear tomorrow, but it's actually going to be adding another option alongside this, and there'll be more details about that being released very soon as well. So stay tuned for that.
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to it because I've used the FortiZTP beta and it looks absolutely fantastic.
And we just had a question about FortiExtender as well. Yes, there is a FortiExtender cloud where you can do something very similar as well. And the zero-touch provisioning for that is very easy.
We do have a question from Umar just asking if there's any way to bulk register devices without FortiDeploy.
Yeah, so that goes back to what I was saying before about the difference between the bulk registration key and the FortiDeploy SKU. So you can do bulk registrations regardless of whether FortiDeploy is turned on or not. They're separate services. So if you don't want FortiDeploy, but you're ordering, say, 500 devices and you want to register all of them all at once, that's fine. You can still do a bulk registration key for that.
Fantastic. Well, that's all the questions that I can see that have come through so far. If we have missed anyone's questions, don't worry, we'll go through after the session and make sure that we've answered all the questions, and anyone that we haven't, we'll reach out and answer your question directly. Otherwise, that's all we sort of had planned for today. Andrew, any last things before we round it up?
No, that's it. Just wanted to say thank you very much for coming along. Hopefully this has been enjoyable and you've all learnt something out of this. And I'd just like to say stay tuned for future Wavelink webinars to talk about more of these features as well. What we've been through today, obviously there's a lot more we could go into around FortiAP, FortiSwitch, even FortiZTP coming up. So stay tuned for more webinars on that topic as well. And if you have things that you want to hear about, please get in touch. And let us know.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming, Andrew, and co-hosting with us. It's been a slightly different style to what we normally do, but it's great to have everyone shooting through their questions and working through them. On behalf of myself, thank you everyone for attending. If you've got any questions, please reach out at any time. We're more than happy to jump on a call and to work through and explain it a little bit further with anyone. Otherwise, I'll hand it back over to Rio to end the session for us.
Sweet. Thank you everyone for joining today's session. Just another thank you to Kieran and Andrew for putting this session together. If you did tune in a bit later, this session is recorded and will be uploaded in the following days. Just some more information around the Wavelink Fabric Ready portal. This is the ultimate one-stop shop for all Wavelink's Fortinet partners. As Kieran mentioned, you will find information on our latest promotions and events, such as Info-Bytes, or our desired experiential events, such as the upcoming 2023 F1 Australia GP. You can also claim sales and certifications through the portal and ultimately earn reward points. Now, the reward winners will be sent through an email today, so make sure to check your inbox. For more information about the Wavelink Fabric Ready portal, please email marketing@wavelink.com.au. But for any other further inquiries about today's session, please contact presales@wavelink.com.au. We hope you all have a great day and hope to see you all in the future. Thanks, everyone.